Hi, Linda. I am just going to wait another minute and see if anyone else shows up, and then we will get started, and I'll just let other people in as we go. Hopefully everyone's hanging in there this week. It's been a little chaotic. Double checking to make sure there are no new questions since the last time I looked. Yep, looks like I have them all, so that's good. So we will get started right now. All right. So it's nice to see you, Linda. I know you asked some questions, and I will get to them shortly. Someone else asked questions first, so I'm just going in order. There's no exact theme to today. Sometimes there's like a real theme, so we're going to cover a couple of different topics. So the first question is pretty personal and specific. I am going to answer it, and maybe it'll be helpful for other people, but I'm not going to be able to like go into maybe as much problem solving in detail as we could do in like a one-on-one situation. This is for Emily, who has anovulatory cycles. That's sort of like something that we already know, and has been having some real success with seeing changes in her hormones in a more like predictable natural pattern that has really improved and changed since she's addressed a lot of gut health issues and things that previously went unaddressed, and kind of the only thing that was making any difference for her before was supplementing with hormones like estrogen and progesterone, and that wasn't actually enabling her to ovulate. It was just kind of enabling her to get a period. So now we're in this phase of tracking cycles and looking for her body to make these hormone rises and like have a more predictable cycle. So she's confused. Her last period was September 6th. Then you had 24 consecutive days of egg white cervical mucus, and then started testing with MIRA 10 days ago, had a small LH surge of 16.5, but doesn't think she ovulated because her progesterone only went up to 1.1, and doesn't know what to do. Wonders if she could have a cyst or something else, and is worried. And then did an update today saying that her progesterone went up a little bit more to 1.9, but she knows that's not really high enough to confirm ovulation, and she's wondering what's going on. So she did share screenshots of her MIRA. And what I would say is, hi, Miranda, we're just getting started. And the first question is a little bit more like specific to someone's specific case. The rest of the questions after this are going to be a little bit more general to other people, but this is still, you know, interesting and helpful in some ways for everyone. So yeah, Emily, I looked at the two MIRA screenshots that you'd sent, and I would say that for you, given that what we know about your cycles and everything, I think that 16.5 that your LH jumped to, especially the way that it looks on the chart, being low, going up, coming down, that does look like it could be an LH surge that could be sufficient enough for you to ovulate. It's a good start. It's something we're looking for from you. I think that's really good. I think it doesn't exactly track with the 24 consecutive days of egg white cervical mucus that you were reporting before seeing the LH surge. I would expect to see cervical mucus become true egg white cervical mucus when the LH goes up, as opposed to for 3 weeks before it goes up. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on with the mucus. I think it could be that your estrogen just is higher on its own than it has been before, and that you are just more moist. And so maybe what you're reading as a change is a change for you, but it's not actually a change to cervical mucus that is like slippery because its cellular structure has changed because of responding to an LH surge, as an indication of like it being right before ovulation. I think it's something we still have to kind of work through. And I know I answered questions about cervical mucus, I think in another Q&A, or maybe it was in must have been in a Q&A. I don't think I did a masterclass on cervical mucus, but I tried to go through a bunch of stuff, and I think it was in part for you. And I know your situation is a little different from other people's, and so this is more complicated for you. I'm basically saying I'm not totally convinced that was 24 days of actual egg white cervical mucus, although obviously I'm not there with you and I do trust you to assess it. But I do think that you may be seeing hormonal changes that are having an effect on the moisture and the fluids and things that you see vaginally that may be something that you're reading as egg white cervical mucus, but is actually something else. And I don't think it's bad. I think it's probably good. So I do think this rise to like 16.5 might be high enough for you to ovulate. But I agree that your progesterone, even going up to the 1.9 today, is not high enough to confirm that ovulation has occurred. Now, it's 1, 2, 3. Today is the 4th day after the surge. So it is theoretically possible that this 1.9 today means that your progesterone is starting to rise and that you are going to see, even if you got to like a 4 or something like that, we might say, oh, this probably is high enough to confirm that you probably ovulated and that it just wasn't a super robust ovulation, creating a juicy, fat, robust luteal body that is now pumping out like high levels of progesterone. There's sort of 2 potential things that could have happened here. 1, you may not have ovulated. And 2, you may have ovulated and you may not be producing progesterone. So the way that you would need to find this out more than what Mira can tell us is to go into a doctor and have a vaginal ultrasound and have them look at your ovaries. And that's where your question about a cyst comes in. They would look at your ovaries on the ultrasound. Ideally, it's like a reproductive endocrinologist or somebody who does this often so that they're familiar with it. But what we'd be looking for is what do they see? Are there any follicles? If there are any follicles, how many are there and what sizes are they in millimeters? And then also they can often tell by looking at a dominant or a lead follicle that was previously kind of like round. It can sometimes be oval, but like it looked full, like a full balloon. And then after ovulation, it gets a little like squooshed so that it has a look almost like a balloon that's starting, it's like 3 days after the party. It isn't bumping up against the ceiling anymore. It's kind of like coming down a little bit. It has less resistance against the rubber of the balloon. If you touched it, the follicle will look a little like that if there's been ovulation, because it has been it has opened, a little opening, and the egg has come out and some of the fluid has come out with it, so it is a little less full. So if they can see on an ultrasound that you are getting close to ovulating, or that you have one of these follicles that looks like it's post ovulation, then they can also take some blood tests and try to confirm based on, I'd say, your estrogen level, your LH level, and your progesterone level. Sort of, does it seem like you have ovulated and your progesterone isn't high enough, or does it seem like you haven't ovulated? And it's tricky because you don't get these like super clear signs of ovulation to know, but it is very realistic to think that you might need some progesterone supplementation after ovulation in order to sustain a pregnancy, in order to, support a healthy pregnancy. It's a little bit different from taking progesterone and then stopping progesterone in order to stimulate a bleed, which isn't really about having a full functioning cycle in which you could conceive. Having some progesterone supplementation post ovulation in order to add to what that follicle makes on its own in order to support an embryo in the earliest stages of pregnancy could be seen as just like supportive of a natural cycle. And it's something that other women who do ovulate more easily than you do often need. I always want to remind people that if you are supplementing progesterone in the luteal phase, you have to be prepared to take a pregnancy test at the time that you would expect to get a period. And that's because some women will bleed while supplementing progesterone, and most women, generally speaking, will not. They will need to know that they have unfortunately not conceived, stop the progesterone, and then like a day or two later, start their bleed. And that will lengthen the total length of a woman's cycle. So if she's used to having a 28-day or a 26-day or a 30-day, whatever the number is, cycle, and she waits until day 30 to take a pregnancy test, that's the day she would normally get a period, and then she stops progesterone and she doesn't bleed until day 32 or 33, now she has theoretically a 32-day cycle, and that can freak people out immediately, like they've messed something up, their cycles are going off. The thing to understand is that what's changed is the length of time after ovulation, nothing about how your body progresses to ovulation and the time of ovulation has been changed by adding that progesterone supplementation. And the lengthening of the luteal phase is intentional. We did it on purpose for a reason. We saw a need to increase the amount of progesterone that your body has available to support pregnancy, because the whole goal is to be pregnant, not to have a perfect cycle, right? And we have added that progesterone, and then we have waited to make sure that we could get an accurate pregnancy test before stopping it, because the whole point of taking it is to support pregnancy if it occurs. And then we have stopped it, and then your body has responded by getting a period. And so adding that extra 2 days post ovulation just makes the total length of your cycle longer for an intentional reason. It's not a problem, and it hasn't had any impact on the timing of your ovulation. So I think it is possible, Emily, if we are consistently seeing, which it seems like we are, these little luteal surges for you, which are such a big deal, and we're seeing a change in like your vaginal fluids, that one of the next things we have to consider is how do we confirm that you are ovulating, or how do we assume that you are ovulating and time giving you some progesterone supplementation so that you can try to get pregnant, which is the whole goal. So I do think going to see your RE and having an ultrasound and some blood work on the same day, and then let's see what those tell us. Maybe that tells us something about what we could do in your next cycle. The timing of when you would get a blood test for progesterone post-ovulation is typically 7 days post-ovulation. So you do still have a little bit of time to arrange that with your doctor, because today is only day 5. Day 7 would be Sunday. So you might need to get a prescription today in order to get that blood drawn on the weekend. Or if you're going to a fertility clinic, they may be open on Sunday and you may just be able to pop in for it. If you can't get it tested on 7 days post, you can get it tested 8 days post, right? 8 days is better than 6 days. So that would be the other thing to do. And then the one other part of your question was about a cyst. Could you have a cyst? So if you get a vaginal ultrasound, they will be looking at your ovaries and they will be trying to assess what the picture of your ovaries tells us. And so a cyst on your ovaries, this is a functional cyst that we're talking about. We're not talking about like a solid cyst, a dermoid cyst, any of those other types of cysts, just the ones that we hear about often that kind of like appear and then disappear. They're these temporary things while you're trying to conceive. So this type of cyst is a follicle on the ovary. We change the terminology that we use, the name that we use to apply to something that we see on the ovaries at different points in the cycle based on what it's doing. So when you first, these are my ovaries, these are my follicles. When you first go in for like baseline testing and they do a vaginal ultrasound and they see antral follicles on your ovaries, and they might do an antral follicle count, those are follicles. They're just really small. And then as the cycle progresses, whether you're using medication or whether you're doing things naturally, some number, we don't know what number, of those little antral follicles are going to grow and respond and recruit, they call it. So they're going to get bigger. And one in a natural cycle with no medication should become the biggest one, the dominant or the lead follicle, it should get really big. That doesn't mean that some of these other ones might not still be there and they might not still be like behind in size. When you're doing an IVF cycle, of course, we know that we're measuring the sizes of multiple follicles and trying to get as many of them to grow together as possible. In a cycle where we're not talking about medication, they may still be like kind of small, but the one lead one. That lead follicle is the follicle that we are the most focused on with ovulation and natural conception. Once the egg is ovulated out of it, once you have that surge and the ovulation happens, we no longer call this a follicle, but it doesn't disappear. So this is a fluid-filled space in which an egg grows. That's what it is when it is a follicle. Once the egg is gone and has ovulated, it is still a fluid-filled space that an egg grew in, but now it is also making hormones to support pregnancy with that egg, because the goal is for that egg to be fertilized and implant as an embryo and become a pregnancy. So this fluid-filled space also makes hormones. And that is called a luteal body or a corpus luteum from the time that you ovulate until the time that you get a period. It's a luteal body. It's making hormones. It's doing a job. It's not a problem that it's there. Once you have gotten a period and you're no longer pregnant, no longer potentially pregnant, this luteal body, this previous follicle, this fluid-filled space is no longer needed, and the hormones that it's making can disrupt the beginning of another cycle, because the way our bodies work, the end of a menstrual cycle that ends without pregnancy is a hard reset. It's like turning off your computer and turning it back on. And the reason we do a baseline set of tests on like day 2 or day 3 of your cycle is that we're expecting all the hormones that had risen while they were trying to get you pregnant have gone down. And so we get what's called a baseline, a lowest level test of all of those things on day 2 or day 3 before they immediately start to rise at different times in different ways. So if that luteal body that previously was a follicle is still there on day 2 or day 3, that's when it's called a cyst. And it is one of these functional cysts. That means that it's a cyst that derived out of natural functioning, right? It's not a scary cancerous cyst. It's nothing like that. If it's still there, it can be doing one of two things. It can be doing nothing, just sitting there, being unattractive because we want to see little guys so that we know how to measure how they're growing over the next cycle. Or it can be continuing to pump out hormones. And that's the part that disrupts a cycle. It may not disrupt it that much. A natural cycle may continue totally fine with it. It may delay an ovulation because that follicle needs to kind of like get the message that its job is over. Those hormones aren't needed. It needs to be reabsorbed and disappear back into the ovary. So it may cause a delayed ovulation. It may just, not be a problem. It may stop everything and the girl may skip an ovulation and skip a cycle. We don't really know, but they generally won't start stimulating you with any medication for any purpose while that follicle, that cyst is still pumping out hormones and acting in its previous capacity as a luteal body, because it's not worth it. It's going to work against the medication and it'll have less impact. So that's where you would have a cyst that would potentially be disrupting the functioning of your natural cycle. If you're in the middle of the cycle and you're getting an LH surge and you have a body like that, it's probably not a cyst. It's probably a follicle or a luteal body, but it's possible that it's a cyst that has persisted from the previous cycle. Your last period started in the beginning of September and we're now at the beginning of November. So you've either skipped a cycle or you're still in kind of like a prolonged follicular phase. And it's possible that you've had a cyst throughout that time that has been pumping out progesterone when it wasn't really needed and keeping things in suspended animation, but your progesterone levels aren't high. If it was pumping out estrogen, it could still mess things up, but it's harder for us to measure it because your estrogen should be rising and higher in the follicular phase. So what I would say is a vaginal ultrasound with measurements of everything that's going on your ovaries plus blood work is probably the best way that we'll know what's going on right now. And I don't think a cyst is most likely to be what's disrupting things, but hopefully my explanation of what one is and how it works makes it easier to understand that. The next question is also from Emily, and this is more general. She says, do you ever recommend an HTMA test to see if people have nutritional deficiencies, nutrient deficiencies? And if so, what HTMA do you like? So an HTMA test, I always have to look up what it stands for, but it's basically like a hair analysis. And hair analysis tests, there are different ones that different people do, which is why she's asking this question. In my experience, a lot of the hair analysis tests that people do are actually not so much to test for nutrient deficiencies as they are to test for like heavy metal exposure, things like that. There's nothing wrong with doing a hair test for either nutrient deficiencies or for heavy metal exposure. We can run additional tests for you. You guys have had some tests that are part of the FFP program, like you do the 23andMe and the Fertility and the GI map and the Dutch, but we can run additional tests for you. And sometimes we bring them up, sometimes you bring them up. There's a couple, like one of the ones that we like that's for metal and nutrients and like toxic exposure is actually a urine test. But it tests for all kinds of nutrients like sodium, calcium, selenium, zinc, magnesium, iron, copper. It tests for all kinds of metals like nickel and platinum and cadmium and lithium, all these kinds of things. So it is a pretty good test. And you could just ask us to run it. We can set it up for you through Rupa and then get the results and then help you understand the results. There is a hair analysis that we can also do through Rupa. And this one is, let's see. It definitely is going to test for heavy metals and like toxic exposures. This is what I mostly see hair tests doing. It has some nutrients like chromium, zinc, copper, magnesium, selenium, all the ones that I mentioned in the other test, but then it also has all of these metals and things. There is also a blood test that I like that we also can do through Rupa that's through Vibrant Wellness. And they have an anti-aging panel. And they've changed it, I think, since the last time I ordered it. So I don't think the name is exactly what I'm used to it being, but I have a copy of one that we did from one of my clients open here. And I really like it. I was looking for what the name of the test was on here and I don't see their name, but they do like a liver and kidney function panel. It has a whole hormone profile in it, which can be really helpful. It has a micronutrient part that is the majority of the testing, and it's pretty cool. So they give you like some categories that things fall into, like liver detoxification and gastrointestinal barrier and mitochondrial function, skin and anti-aging. And then they go through each of the nutrients like vitamin A and vitamin B12 and so on and so forth, and tell you like how your levels like show up. And then there are some like dietary recommendations. We get sort of like a range for understanding kind of like what your like where your levels fall and kind of why. And then there's a nice visual for everything. And then there are some recommendations at the end, and we can like go through all of this with you also. So what I would say is anybody who's having issues and unsure sort of like what direction to take their diet and supplementation in order to fine tune it, could definitely consider doing the toxins and heavy metals and the nutrients. And we can definitely set that stuff up. You can contact your coach and we can figure out what panel makes the most sense and like help you get it set up. And then we can go over the test results with you. Obviously there's a cost for each of these, but for each test it's different. So I can't tell you what it is. I've seen this make a difference, like the girl that I was just looking at. What we discovered from her test, for instance, was that all the nutrients that she's the most severely deficient in really indicate that she is not metabolizing fat well. She's eating the right amount of fat, but she wasn't metabolizing, like actually absorbing and using the fat. And so the nutrients from the fat and the nutrients that the fat was necessary for her to absorb were the ones that were the most challenged. And so we were able to make some specific recommendations to try to address that for her. And we started to see changes in like her hormone levels based on her being able to absorb these things better. Emily had another question about very bad eczema on her face and legs. After several months of trying to heal her gut, it went away, and now it's back all around her neck. And she's also getting white patches, which she thinks might be vitiligo. Is this an indication that my gut is still inflamed? I'm feeling very lost and I don't know what to do. So it's fantastic that your eczema went away, and it really sucks that it's back. So I would ask myself, in general, anybody, if something like this happens, is there anything that's changed over the period of time from what was going on when my eczema was better to what's going on when my eczema is worse? And obviously you worked really hard on your gut health, so you're going to immediately think about food and what you're eating. But it goes beyond food and what you're eating. You know, did you change a laundry detergent, and are you actually reactive to something that's in that detergent? Does it have some kind of fragrance or something in it? Did something else change in your environment or in the products that you're using, other things that you're exposed to? Don't think only about food. Even supplements, like some of the inactive ingredients, you could be having like an allergic reaction to in some way. Another thing that I always think of with eczema is I always think about omega-3s and the omega-3, omega-6 ratio. So if there's been a change in how much you're supplementing omega-3s, that could potentially be related. Sometimes we have people do a higher dose and then we step them down to like a maintenance dose. And sometimes that maintenance dose might, for this particular person, not really be high enough. These are things that I think about. The white patches could be vitiligo. That's true. Vitiligo is extreme. It is hard to see on someone who doesn't have darkly melanated skin in the way that it's really obvious on melanated skin. So Emily is pale like me. And so it may be confusing to see. I would say that there's another thing that it could also be, which is a fungus that's called Tinea versicolor. Tinea versicolor, tinea kind of is a type of fungus, and then versicolor means like variety of colors. It can show up as any color on anybody's skin. So it could show up as brown spots, it could show up as pink spots, it could show up as white spots, it can show up as any color. And I've had it before. I had it on the insides of my arms. There was no texture at all. You couldn't feel that it was there. If you couldn't see it, you wouldn't know. But it crept up into my palm here, and then it went all the way down my arm. And it lasted for about a year. It was, I don't know, probably like 15 years ago. It lasted for about a year, and then it did resolve on its own. It wasn't itchy. It wasn't tender. There was nothing other than the color change that I could see. But tinea versicolor would definitely go along with maybe some gut issues. It would be less extreme and not an immune, like an autoimmune condition like vitiligo, and also not permanent. So I would say a trip to the dermatologist is probably a good idea to get those white patches checked out, see what they think they are. They can use like a black light to look for fungus. If it is vitiligo, maybe you need a trip to a rheumatologist to get that diagnosed. But I think a dermatologist is the first place to start, and it might not be vitiligo. It could be tinea versicolor. Could probably be something else too, but that's the first thing I think of. Now we're on to Linda's questions. And Linda wants to know, what can I eat or do to nourish my adrenal glands? So this is an interesting question because half her questions are sort of, the next one is about improving testosterone. And I think they're really connected. So what I would say is, everything that we recommend is going to be beneficial to having a healthy testosterone level for a woman who's trying to conceive. And it's also beneficial to maintaining good adrenal health and good adrenal function. That doesn't mean that there aren't additional things that we can recommend, but they're not going to sound like, you know, the heavens have opened and the angels are singing, there's this new like miraculous thing. It's going to sound repetitive of a lot of what we say. So for your adrenal function, really and truly, the most important thing that you can do is to maintain good rhythms in your body. Your adrenal glands produce hormones. The two primary hormones that we most often sort of link to adrenal function are adrenaline and cortisol. And adrenaline, we know, is part of your fight or flight system. It is activated under stress. And it, you know, part of the reason we like caffeine and cocaine and sugar, those of us that partake in any of or all of those things, is that, or maybe even like Adderall, I don't know, I've never taken that. But these things, these stimulants, mimic what adrenaline does in our body. They make us feel, you know, superhuman, amazing, brightly alert and awake and capable, and like we can go, 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 right? So limiting the foods that that mimic that in your body is a good way to support normal adrenal function, right? So you got to pay attention to the caffeines and the sugars and the stimulants. And you want to not have very many of them. Minimize not only how much and how often, but actually, like, if you have a big response to them, then you need to be more cautious of them. You don't want to have any kind of like dependence on them. And you have to sleep well and enough and at the right hours, because the other hormone, cortisol, is half of the two hormones that make up your sleep wake cycle, your circadian rhythms. Melatonin is one of those hormones, and melatonin should be kind of at its highest level at the time that you are falling asleep at night. And the time that that occurs in our bodies is sometimes adjusted based on our habits and also based on like changes in time zone, or like when the time changes because it's spring or fall. Those should be temporary things. It's also a little bit different at different points in our life. So the biggest change that I always think of is that in teenagers, their melatonin shifts to being at its highest point a little bit later at night. And so that's one of the reasons why parents are always screaming at their teens to like go to bed at 10, and the teens want to be up until midnight because their melatonin rises later than their parents' melatonin. The older we get, the earlier it rises in a way, not 100%, but to some degree. So, you know, melatonin should be high when you are ready to go to bed, and it should be making you sleepy. And then it's going to fall throughout the night. That's the normal pattern, so that you can feel awake in the morning. Well, at the same time that melatonin is falling, cortisol is going from its low level and it is rising. And it's going to rise to be at its highest point, ideally around the time that you're waking up in the morning. So managing a sleep cycle that allows you to sleep when your melatonin is high, not ignoring feeling sleepy and not going to bed, and then waking up, trying to get enough hours so that when you actually have to wake up, it is at a time when your cortisol has risen enough so that you do feel awake and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. That's one of the most critical things you can do for your healthy adrenal function. Other things you can do are manage your, the other rhythm that you can primarily manage is your metabolic rhythm. So eating early in the morning, soon after you've gotten up, within 60 minutes or possibly within 30 minutes, and making sure that it is, you know, some protein and some fat, things that burn slowly and maintain you, and then maintaining that level. Now, these are all things that we're already encouraging you to do and working with you on. So I'm not expecting this to like be new information for anybody, but obviously eating consistently throughout the day, not depending upon adrenaline for energy because you have like fuel coming from your food. I would say also exercising regularly, but ideally for your adrenal function, you're not doing like intense exercise. There are values to intense exercise, and you can probably, depending upon how healthy your adrenal function is, you can probably be doing like moderate HIIT exercises, right? Where you like do some high intensity intervals that are very short within a workout plan, but you're really not like doing the long distance running, and you're not you're not doing like the highest intensity, like what are they called? I can't think of the name of that really popular type of exercise that's super intensive. CrossFit. Thank you, Miranda. My brain. Yeah. So like CrossFit is not the adrenal gland's friend, right? Now, everybody's adrenal function is a little bit different. So there are some people who are really going to thrive on like higher intensity exercise, and there are some people who are going to really need like super low intensity exercise. Another thing, because we talked about adrenaline and stress, in order to support your adrenal function, you do have to try to manage your stress, which, I mean, that's a loaded question, a loaded thing to even bring up, right? Like I always think that when someone tells you to relax, I try never to say that to anyone, because when someone tells you to relax, that's like a command. That's basically the same as telling someone to shut up. Like my response to someone telling me to relax is the opposite of relax. So me telling you, oh, you're going to need to manage your stress, I know that that's like me telling you to relax, but things that cause you to become adrenalized, things that cause you to enter fight or flight, are going to put a strain on your adrenal system that's going to work against having like good adrenal functioning that can be supportive of your health in so many other ways. So this is where we need to like go to therapy. We need to deal with our like need for perfectionism and all of our things. And it's not about, it's basically the same as meditation, right? Like the goal of meditation is not to be the perfect meditator. The goal of meditation is to go through the action, go through the process, and like invest the time in trying, because actually you are changed by the trying. And that's the same thing with therapy. It's the same thing with perfectionism. It's the same thing with managing your stress and whatever the thing is. It's not about besting it and perfecting it and like checking it off your list. It's about going through the process of identifying and like coming to terms with the like with sharing space and time in your head and your body with these stressors, and figuring out how you can best manage them on a day-to-day basis. And that also helps your adrenal function. Sea salt can be helpful. We're not trying to like become crazy salt addicts. That has a lot of potential downsides, but sometimes when you're eating really healthy, you're not eating enough salt. So salt can be really helpful for some people. And there is one of the kind of like no sugar, low ingredient electrolyte options that's out there is called LMNT, which is like, it's going to be like Element. That is a high salt electrolyte solution. It comes in like little packets and you add it to fluid. And sometimes having one of those, maybe not one every day, but having one or two of those in a week, or, kind of figuring out, sometimes that is a good way to add a little bit of salt to your diet instead of like adding salt to your cooking and stuff, because it comes with the other electrolytes and your body hopefully can use all of them together to kind of like do all the things that we need the electrolytes to do, like managing fluids and things like that. And then in terms of like supplements, I think cordyceps is maybe the thing that I would start with first, because it is an adaptogen, but it is an adaptogen that I think most people work really well with. Some of the other adaptogens, they'll be good for like 80 or 75% of the people, but then they will actually work against some of the other people. So we want to be a little cautious about like just adding things like ashwagandha and maca and stuff like that to our diets, to our supplements. But cordyceps is something that I think from a Chinese medical perspective makes sense. And yeah, so that would be, I know it's not like take this supplement and or eat this food and your adrenal glands will be fine. But that's what we do. And so then the second question, which I said was kind of related, was in addition to weightlifting and strength training, are there other ways to improve testosterone levels? So again, this is related. Everything I said about improving your adrenal function, it all helps with your testosterone and your estrogen and your progesterone, and your other reproductive hormones too. In addition to that, from a nutritional perspective, if you haven't had some of your nutrients tested and your testosterone is low, maybe we should do like a nutrient panel, and we should look at your zinc, and we should look at your selenium, and we should look at your specific individual B vitamins, and maybe we should look at your vitamin D and your DHEA, right? Like DHEA supplementation is, let's see, Liliana has a comment here. There's the chat. I'll have to read this thing about LMNT. I'm glad you put that in there. I am always cautious about recommending LMNT just as an electrolyte supplement, because it is a high salt supplement, which is why I said it's not something I think really anyone should be having every single day. It's something that you could be having a couple of times a week. And specifically in this case, sorry, my cat, in this case where maybe the person would be benefiting from salt, maybe it would be something that would be beneficial there. I will read that link at some point and see what I think. But I think even if there's nothing, if that's like a nothing burger and there's no real concern there, you still have to be concerned about a high salt electrolyte, and it's not the right thing to have like as an everyday thing for really anybody. So, but I appreciate the link and I will read it because it is good to know. So for testosterone, prioritize getting enough sleep. It's the same thing as with your adrenal function, but vitamin D is a vitamin. It's a fat soluble vitamin. We think of it almost as a hormone because your vitamin D levels need to be optimized for your body to make your hormones. And I literally see certain women, this is not going to apply to all people, but certain women are so sensitive that when their vitamin D goes out of kind of an optimal range, their FSH goes up or their AMH goes down or their testosterone goes down. So like we do want to watch your vitamin D. We don't want it to be high. Over 100 or even like approaching 100 is too high. And there are negative implications to that. More is not always better. But in that kind of like 60-ish range is usually good for people. There are a few people that need to keep it kind of up in the 70s. And it's definitely important that it be higher than just like a 32 or something like that. So I would be thinking about your vitamin D. I would be testing your DHEA sulfate. Whenever we ask you to get your DHEA sulfate tested, often it's because you've been taking a DHEA supplement or you've been recommended one by your doctor or you have questions about it. We're always asking you to get your testosterone tested with it. That's because if your testosterone is high and your DHEA sulfate is low, we can't really supplement with DHEA. It's going to raise your testosterone in a way that's going to be problematic. And we have to try to figure out why are these two things kind of like in opposite directions. What we almost always see is that your testosterone is normal, low, or low. But for women, the range for what's normal is like incredibly low. So it looks just kind of like low, but also normal all at the same time. That's an indication that it is okay to supplement with DHEA if the DHEA sulfate levels suggest that it's necessary. And sometimes we're supplementing with a tiny amount, like 5 milligrams a day. And, you know, sometimes it needs to be more. And it is a thing where you're going to start a supplement if we decide that you need one, and then you're going to retest, and then we're probably going to adjust it again. And then you're going to retest and we might adjust it again. Because for some people, it can be a really tricky thing to like get it in the right range. But that is one sort of like supplementy way that we can do stuff. And then of course, eating enough protein and fat from animals, because we're back at those omega-3s, which are really important. The other thing I would say about testosterone, and I mean, again, this is just the same thing it's another explanation for why we focus on these things in so many different ways. But like managing your blood sugar levels is important, because elevated blood sugar, even if it's not elevated to the point where you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, is the way I think of it is you can think of it a little bit like having kind of low level systemic inflammation all the time, and that will disrupt your testosterone production. And then managing inflammation, exactly the same thing. Like it just interferes with your body's ability to make these hormones and respond to them. Anything else? I said zinc and selenium. Here, like I think I would start with cordyceps also as kind of like the sort of adaptogen type hormone, but maca in this specific case, like when testosterone is low, when estrogen is low, maca is something that we might also consider supplementing with. Next question, also from Linda. I would like to know what serrapeptase does and how it helps improve fertility. So serrapeptase is what we call a systemic enzyme, or it's called a proteolytic enzyme. And the first proteolytic enzyme formula that we usually jump to and like suggest that someone take is one called wobenzyme N, which is a blend of hormones and of enzymes. And that is because of the research that's specifically been done on women with like a history of pregnancy loss and endometriosis and immunological issues. But serrapeptase is another proteolytic enzyme. It's a single ingredient one, and we do use it as like the alternative because wobenzyme N has gone out of stock in many cases. So Amy, I think, probably has links to some of this stuff on the website. If you coach with me, I can definitely send you some links. And probably we should do like a master class or something on this in the coming year. I'm thinking about topics for my master classes for next year. So if you guys have suggestions and you want to pop them in the chat, I will be trying to figure that out in the next week or so. So I'd love the suggestions. So the reason that we recommend these things is because of the anti-inflammatory effect that they have, specifically with wobenzyme N. It's been studied to have an impact on the immune response in the uterus and to have helped women to sustain pregnancy. I have a girl who I've been seeing for years in the clinic. She's now working on baby number 2. And she has like a really strong history of back issues. She's had injuries, she's had pain, she's had like surgery, she has all kinds of things. And she was prepping for a transfer cycle. And as soon as they started her on estrogen, her whole body like ached. And I was like, okay, no history of miscarriage here, but I was like, let's see if wobenzyme can help with this, because we don't want her to be in this inflamed state going into this transfer. And as soon as she started taking the wobenzyme N, her body aches stopped, which she was utterly shocked by. I have seen that happen with girls who have rheumatoid arthritis. We have seen cases, Amy and I both have had patients who only ever get pregnant when they are taking either antibiotics or wobenzyme. And although they're not having the same exact effect, they are clearly in those particular people dropping a certain type of inflammation or a certain type of immune function to the point where the woman can implant an embryo. So serrapeptase is just one ingredient. It is not going to be like the tests on the proteolytic enzymes that are specifically about wobenzyme N aren't going to like tell you exactly the same thing about serrapeptase. But serrapeptase is one of the things that has proven to be most effective for people with long COVID. And there's another thing. It's not, I don't think nattokinase counts as I'm going to Google, is nattokinase a proteolytic enzyme? Yes, it is a proteolytic enzyme, but it specifically breaks down fibrin, which is involved in blood clots. So it is an option for someone like, I have a girl that I'm working with right now who has like almost an allergic reaction to aspirin. And so I've had her test with willow bark because I want to see if she is reacting to the actual like salicylic acid or if she's reacting to something else that's in the baby aspirin tablets that she's taking. But the next thing on my list is instead of aspirin, if she can't tolerate the willow bark, I'm going to put her on nattokinase. It's a different proteolytic enzyme that specifically works against blood clotting. And this nattokinase and serrapeptase combined are part of some of the most successful protocols for people with long COVID. And as we know, long COVID is inflammatory and blood clotty. So it has a lot of connections to a lot of the things that we see with recurrent pregnancy loss and like implantation failure and endometriosis and stuff. So I track it pretty closely. So basically, the reason that these proteolytic enzymes are beneficial for fertility is that they reduce inflammation or potentially blood clotting, and they therefore have an impact of slowing the immune response within the uterus that would otherwise be kind of like super high alert fighting against an embryo as it's trying to implant. That's the best way that I can explain it. It's a very safe, it's not just like the LMNT. It's not for everyone, and it isn't something that you just take without needing it and without understanding it. And we keep the doses fairly low, right? Like most of the products are telling you to dose it 3 times a day. We start everyone off with once a day. Partly that's because you have to take them on an empty stomach, and half of you or more are already having to take your thyroid medication on an empty stomach. And like this becomes very challenging to manage with eating, especially according to like the egg quality diet where you're cooking all your own food, and like, things get a lot. There are some girls who I increase it to twice a day, and every once in a while, maybe there's someone who I have taking it 3 times a day, but most of the time it's once a day and sometimes twice a day. So we're not even necessarily up at like the highest doses. And these are things you can continue in pregnancy. You can continue the once a day with a baby aspirin. If you're on a baby aspirin, I generally don't have you taking it twice a day. And if you are on any kind of injected blood thinner like Lovenox or Clexane, you're not going to continue the proteolytic enzyme. It might not be a problem, but it's just too many cooks in the kitchen, too many things that are trying to manipulate the same things all at the same time when the whole important goal is that you are pregnant. And the drug is incredibly powerful. So we just leave the drug to like act on its own, and we try not to interfere with it because it's probably going to act more than the enzyme could anyway. And we just want to be safe, right? So we're like extra cautious, more cautious than we need to be, because that's how we keep everyone safe in the like outlier situations. So hopefully that makes sense with what serrapeptase does. You certainly could Google like exactly what the biochemical reaction is that happens. These are enzymes. If you look at the ingredients in the WOB enzyme, some of them sound very similar to digestive enzymes. They do act in the gut, but the gut is always on fire a little bit, right? You can think of your gut as kind of being like the kitchen in your mansion, right? So you have a giant mansion, like I'm thinking Downton Abbey, old school style, where, there's a ton of people making all the behind the scenes stuff run. And you have like a giant, like fire in your stove all the time because people are preparing food for like the whole household all the time, right? So your gut is always a little hot. It's a little inflamed. It's a little, because there are chemical reactions happening in it all the time. Everything you put in your mouth has to get broken down into other parts. Those are chemical reactions. So a little bit of like flame, a little bit of heat, a little bit of inflammation is just a normal part of business in digesting stuff and eating. And so that's why enzymes have this ability to change some of those chemical functions and also put like control some of the inflammation and heat that could then expand out from the gut into the rest of the body. So that's the way I think of why an enzyme that you take orally could then have an implication on the way that your immune cells are functioning inside your uterus. It's like it all goes back to the hearth. It all goes back to the like main heating source in the body, the main source of inflammation in the body, which tends to be in the gut. Next question from Linda. Is there a vaginal probiotic you recommend besides Vagibiome? So Vagibiome is pretty good. I don't have any problems with that. I don't know if Linda has tried it and it doesn't work for her. She lives in Spain and she has a lot of trouble getting the stuff delivered to her. So it could be more of just like a sourcing issue. So if you're taking Vagibiome, you're using it, I think that's fine. Seed came out with a vaginal probiotic recently that I think is pretty good, and we can recommend it to you over FullScript because they have it on there. So I have been recommending that for some people. Yeah, Linda says she can't get it. Linda, like, I check that website every day, Linda, to see if they have approved my account. I'm getting ready to email them and ask them over at that European FullScript why Amrita Nutrition, I think they're called. I keep like checking on them every day because now it's been almost a week, I think, that I've been waiting for them to approve my account. And then I'm going to use Linda as my test person, and we're going to put through like a referral, a recommendation for some products for her and see, because I think the company is based in the Netherlands and she lives in Spain. And so we're just trying to see if this is an option for getting stuff to you guys without it having to come from the States or something. So I will email them in the next couple of days if I don't get approved, and then hopefully we'll move ahead. Okay, so Vagibiome's okay. Seed has a good one and it's available over FullScript. The company Fairhaven Health, I think they have one. They're not usually my favorite company because I feel like their products have not consistently been like of the highest quality. They've had some like weird stuff in them, but they are pretty good. They're like second tier choice for me, right? Not first tier choice. So they have one that I think is probably good. Then you get into some that are really focused on UTIs, which if you have UTIs, that's not a problem. I think Eucora might have one that's very UTI focused. Let's see, I'm just Googling to see if there are any brands because things come up all the time. Oh, you know what? Another one that's on FullScript that I love. There's this brand. I have to switch to another. I have it open already in another window. Where is my other window? Oh, there it is. Vitanica. They have two vaginal suppository supplements. They have one that's probiotics. They're called V probiotics, and we can recommend that over FullScript too. They also have one that's for kind of like, it's for people who are having like recurrent vaginal infections, you know, kind of like BV, things like that. That's a boric acid capsule. And it's called V Boric Pro. And we have that on FullScript too. So that's what I would say, like Vagibiome, Seed, Fairhaven Health, and Vitanica are kind of like the first four that I would go to. But if you find another one, especially one that's like available where you are, you can always ask your coach to like, you know, look at it and see if they think it's okay. Because new products come up all the time and they change old products on us all the time. So we're basically always in like, you know, research again and confirm mode. And then the last question of the day, look at me being almost on time, is from Carrie. And Carrie says, what are your thoughts on microwaving foods? I keep reading how bad it is. I don't know how to survive without it. I try not to do it for every meal, but sometimes it's hard to cook everything on the stove. Okay, so if you start getting into whether it's safe to cook in a microwave, you get into a lot of stuff about radiation. And the generally accepted scientific belief is that there is no exposure to you of radiation when you cook in a microwave, that the food that you cook in a microwave is safe, just like any other cooking method. that radiation isn't something that like gets trapped in the food, and it's not like being exposed to microwaved food over time is equivalent to like living near a nuclear power plant or anything like that. There will be people who will disagree with that, and I can't run any tests myself, so I can't really speak to how to assess that. You're gonna decide for yourself how comfortable you feel with the radiation through the microwave. I have one because there's one installed in like every apartment. I use it. I don't use it very often, and I don't generally, well, maybe I probably use it a few times a week. So I'm not saying I never use it. I use it more for like a quick defrost or something like that. I don't use it for full cooking. But that might be more because I don't like the way things taste coming out of it. I don't know, right? Maybe it's less about my fear of radiation and more about my my preferences in cooking. I wasn't raised with food that was cooked in a microwave, so it isn't what I trend towards. My concern when you cook stuff in the microwave is about kind of everything else, everything but the radiation. That being said, right? So what are you cooking? How consistently is it being cooked? Because microwaves, they've gotten better, but like if you put like a chicken breast in there, some of it gets like overcooked and some of it's undercooked. So like, how does it contribute to food safety and things like that? And then what are you cooking it in? Because you have to use, non-metal in the microwave. And the primary thing that most people have used over the years has always been plastic. And that is an area that I'm not very comfortable with. So I would prefer that you're cooking in glass in the microwave and not plastic. I don't really think we need any more opportunities to heat up any kind of plastic, especially a soft plastic like a saran wrap, like a plastic wrap. Like I don't have that in my house. I haven't had it in my house for years because it's such a soft plastic. Like I just don't think there's any value to it. So like I just think about like what are the foods, how sufficiently does the heating kill anything that could be in the food, because there's bacteria and stuff growing on everything everywhere. That's normal, and heat is one of the ways that we kill it and make it safe for us. And like, what are you heating up along with the food, especially when there's like a sauce in a plastic? Yeah, those are my biggest concerns. So what I would say is do the best you can. Like I've had girls, especially during the reboot in the questions, I got multiple questions from girls who live in areas of the world where their water is not drinkable. And so they get all their water delivered to them in giant plastic jugs. And it sits in those jugs, who knows for how long until they get it. And then they keep like a supply of those jugs in their homes because they have to have sufficient water for, like they're freaking out because we don't like plastic bottles. We don't want exposure to any of the nanoparticles, and we don't want any exposure to like the plastic related like phytoestrogen type exposure, all of that stuff. And they're just freaking out. And what I had to say was like, you have to drink water. That's not a choice. It's not optional. You have to have sufficient water, and you have to have the cleanest water that you have access to. And if that means that it comes in a plastic jug that sits in the sun, I don't love it, but I'm drinking it because I have no other option. So yes, those girls can transfer that water into a glass container for the time that they keep it in their homes, right? That is definitely an option. There are things they can do to mitigate it, right? And it's the same thing with the microwave. If you are used to cooking in the microwave and that's the way you know how to cook best, and that's what fits into your lifestyle best, like you have to eat and you have to work and you have to take care of your family and you have to do all the things that you're doing with your time. So I'm not going to judge you and say that's a terrible thing. Don't ever do that. Like stop immediately, just like, reprioritize everything. But what I am going to say is like, let's look for opportunities to reduce the amount that we use the microwave. Let's explore learning how to use the oven as well as the stovetop. Maybe you could have like a toaster oven thing, like a small oven on your desk, on your countertop that you could use for some things that might be more microwave-like than using the full oven. You know, that type of thing. And then let's look at what specific things you choose to do in the microwave. Can you do more of the like melting and defrosting and things like that? And then maybe take those ingredients and like prepare that meal on the stove or in the oven for like the final preparation so that it's in the microwave for less time, et cetera, et cetera. And can you microwave in glass instead of in like, let's just make baby steps, right? And the goal of all of this, when we learn about exposure to chemicals that are in our beauty products and our cleaning products and our cooking products and our cooking methods, the goal is not to like throw everything out and start over and be a totally different person. The goal is to become educated women who then are able to use that information to make the best choices that they can to promote their health, like in the days and weeks and months and years coming, right? So you will learn to make better choices. I think Miranda asked if it matters what type of glass. I saw that pop up. Let me see. Yeah. Oh, Liliana, I'm Sarah, not Heather. I will try to answer your question, and then I'll end after that. I mean, Miranda, that's okay, Liliana. I said that mostly. Actually, I don't think the chat shows up in the video. I was thinking I was saying that for people who see it on video later, but I don't think the chat shows up. Okay, so Miranda, like type of glass. I mean, you know, I'm like an OG Pyrex girl, right? Like the original type of Pyrex. I can't remember what that specific mineral is that's in the glass that makes it so strong and safe that you can put it like in the oven and the dishwasher and everything. And now I think the Pyrex made in the US is not made out of the same glass. So people are getting higher quality products by like thrifting old Pyrex at flea markets and things like that instead of buying brand new. I think stuff that's made in Europe, because you know that's like the oldest stereotype that is sometimes true. It tends to be better. I think that I don't want to say any, but I think the reputable brands of glass cooking and food storage vessels that are available now should provide you some information on what their ingredients are and like why they are helpful. So I would be cautious about glass that could contain things like lead in it. Now, most of that stuff is going to be crystal, and it's going to be like vases, and it's going to be antique, and it's probably not, you know, it's going to be from your grandma or something. So I'd be cautious about that. I would intentionally acquire glass that is intended for cooking. That would be my recommendation, not just use any cute glass something. And then Liliana's last question is about stem cell ovarian rejuvenation, PRP, and thoughts. So that's a big topic. PRP is platelet-rich plasma. PRP is something that wasn't invented for fertility purposes. It's been used for lots of different purposes in people's bodies for a long time with great effect, and it's being expanded and used in more places. So the places where we first used to see it were like people's knees. Having a PRP injection into your knee helped your body to heal like something that would otherwise have to be corrected surgically and help the person to be able to go back to running and stuff like that. Now they're even using it like scalp PRP to help people who have hair loss. And ovarian PRP is the kind that we're the most familiar with, although they also do uterine PRP, where it's like a wash in the uterus. So ovarian PRP is what Liliana is asking about, and that's where they take blood from you and they spin it to separate certain aspects of it. So the platelets are one of the types of blood cells, and then the plasma is the liquid of the blood. And then they've sectioned out like the red blood cells and all the different other types of white blood cells, and not used that. And then they go inside your body and they inject it into your ovaries. The reason that they do that is because the same thing that helps your knee heal so that you can run again or helps you grow more hair will help your ovaries to like be more robust and function what I call younger for a period of time. And we categorize these things that have this tremendous healing and sort of like anti-aging effect as growth factors. So the growth factors that we're the most familiar with outside of this are human growth hormone, because many of us know a kid when we were kids, or a parent who has a kid now who has a really tiny child who may do a growth hormone therapy. Human growth hormone has been used for helping people to grow. And it's often called Omnitrope. That's a drug name. That's the most common drug name, although there's some others. It's also used in some like IVF cycles in order to try to stimulate the ovaries to be more responsive to grow. So instead of using a drug, or instead of using a mimic of the hormone that we have in our bodies when we are children, human growth hormone, which we have very little of when we're adults, we're using other factors that are just more present, kind of like generally throughout our lives, that are in our blood, to help the ovaries grow faster. So when they do the adipose tissue stem cell PRP, which is only done in a few places. Ovarian PRP is being done in more and more places across the United States and the world all the time. And ovarian is ahead of uterine, but any place that does ovarian PRP will eventually, I think, add uterine PRP. So that's less available, but it is becoming more available. The adipose or the stem cell PRP is much less available. So places that I know for sure do it, Dr. Murphy does it here on the East Coast in like Connecticut and maybe New York. They do it in Greece in a couple of different places. There's a clinic on Crete. There's a clinic, I think, in Athens. I think there's a place in Bulgaria that also does it. The adipose PRP, I think it's Bulgaria. Oh, no, it might be Albania. I think Bulgaria is more European than the place that I'm thinking. I think it's Albania. I have the link to it, so if anybody is interested in that, let me know. And I think they're doing it, adipose PRP, no, they're not doing it in Spain, but it's expanding, but it's not in very many places. When they do adipose PRP, they're going to do a, the Bahamas. That might be Dr. Murphy, though. It's the same person. And that's not adipose PRP. That's something else. It's MRT, which we can talk about too. So, I mean, he might do adipose PRP down there too, but he can do it in the US. He doesn't have to do it in the Bahamas. What they do is they take a little liposuction from your belly and take some of your fat. It's enough to do the procedure. It's not enough to be a cute lipo procedure. You're not going to look thinner afterwards. And then they take stem cells from those fat tissues, because that's where we have stem cells in our bodies. We have more stem cells when we're younger. When we're babies, we have our most, and we have fewer and fewer and fewer as we get older. And they tend to only be in high quantities in our fat cells by the time we're, thinking about this stuff. And so then they're going to take these stem cells from those fat tissues and add that to the platelet-rich plasma. So now you're getting two different ways of giving naturally occurring growth factors that are from the woman's own body and pushing them into the ovaries so that the ovaries get like an extra big shot of it, and can respond. So overall, I think all of these procedures are pretty great. That's just like everything else, just like LMNT, doesn't mean they are equally great for everyone or that they are even good for everyone. There will be some people who don't respond. It's really sad. It's really heartbreaking. There will be a few people. They tend to be people who aren't ovulating, aren't getting periods, are really not having much ovarian function, and also I think tend to be older. I do see response so far in my younger girls who are like on the precipice of menopause far too early, as opposed to like a girl who's 48 or 49 or something and is more kind of like accurately timing wise, like approaching that change of life. The other thing that can happen after any of these procedures, especially if you are a more vulnerable person, if you are like, for instance, a 28-year-old girl who has a really, really low AMH, that type of thing, is that your ovaries can need a moment to recover from just the trauma of having injections, right? Some of us, are robust inhale and the ovaries are like, yeah, no problem. So what if you injected me with all these growth hormones and growth factors and stem cells? Like, I'm cool, I'll just ovulate next month, no problem. And some girls' ovaries are like, I can't believe now I have to heal from this, I have to deal with this and regroup and like figure my shit out. And it takes them a moment and they go into like a little pause, and it can freak people out like incredibly, because if they don't ovulate the next cycle, or if their antral follicle count is very low or whatever it is, it can seem like, oh my God, did I fuck up my ovaries and like ruin everything by doing this procedure? In general, it's like a 1 month or a 2 month, or in the longest cases, maybe a 3 month kind of like slow recovery. And again, I see that mostly in the girls who are already more vulnerable. It's in the more extreme cases. But for the most part, women respond, and how long the response lasts for, it's unclear. It's different in different people. They were originally thinking that with regular PRP, you had kind of like 2 to 4 months, where it would improve your ability to recruit more follicles and have them have like higher quality eggs. But maybe it lasts longer than that. But maybe now we are repeating PRP more often. So they used to do it once, now they'll do it 2 or 3 months in a row as part of like a series. So it's hard to like gauge, is a single procedure, for me, they should be doing tests, but is it hard to gauge, like, is a single procedure actually lasting for longer, or is it the way that we're evolving, the way that we use it, meaning that it has a longer effect? But I do think the effects are generally thought to build on each other. So it's not just like you get 3 months from this shot and then you get 3 months from this shot, so on and so forth. The adipose or stem cell PRP has a longer effect. And it is, maybe more in the 6 to 8 or 9 or maybe 12 months period. And it is not repeated as often as, at least at this point in time. It can be repeated. It's just not, if they don't already have like a series of 3 adipose PRPs, like you might repeat it months later, but not a month later. And it's generally speaking reserved more for people who are further on the spectrum of need. So the, PRP is something that you don't even now really have to have a super low antral follicle count or high FSH or low AMH. Like, it can just be part of helping a woman to get the best outcome from an IVF cycle, or from a series of IVF cycles. But the adipose is still more reserved for people who have more need for it. And then MRT is a much bigger topic, which I can't really get into here, but just to say that the thing that Murphy's doing in the Bahamas is, so it's not legal in the US. It is legal in many countries. There are many restrictions in some of those countries on how it can be used, but it is what we sometimes call like third-party IVF, where instead of using an egg donor and a sperm, they take an egg. It needs to be an egg that was retrieved and frozen when it was somewhat less mature than it would be for an IVF cycle, a traditional IVF cycle. They take that egg and they remove the genetic material, which I always call like the genetic packet, the part that is going to be the 23 chromosomes that knit together with the 23 chromosomes from the father's sperm and become the 46 chromosomes of the embryo. Those chromosomes are what we test in like a PGT testing. It's going to take that genetic material from the woman, and then it's going to take an egg that is from a donor and remove her genetic material and put the mother's genetic material into the rest of that other girl's egg. And that's because there is mitochondrial DNA in the rest of the egg. So visually speaking, I know it's weird to mix like food and children and things like that, but the best visual that I have is a chicken egg. You know, there's a yolk and there's a white. So if you think of the yolk as the DNA, the genetic packet that's going to be those 23 chromosomes that knit with the sperm's 23 chromosomes, that it's like taking another girl's egg white and putting your egg yolk into it. And that egg white has mitochondrial DNA, and it has all of the like fuel that fuels the you know, the fertilization and like the early development of the embryo and everything. And it has the supportive abilities to correct errors in those 46 chromosomes as they get mapped together for the new embryo. So like if anyone's ever had an aneuploid embryo on a PGT test, some of those genetic abnormalities where there's a monosomy or possibly a trisomy of a particular chromosome may be things that would self-correct in the embryo as it continues to develop. And we just can't really tell, right? We do the best we can, the testing does the best it can, but that egg white that comes from the other person has the ability to correct some of those errors. And it is stronger from when it's from the donor because it's younger. And so I often say to people, like when we're talking about egg quality and how egg quality goes down with age and time and everything, you really, like most of us think of it as if it means that like you are providing crappier chromosomes, you're providing like you're providing more broken DNA to your potential embryo, to your potential child. And that's not true. That's not what it's about, right? Like if Al Pacino can have a kid in his late 70s, he's providing the same genetic packet of, you know, chromosomes that are going to become DNA that an egg does. He just doesn't have to provide all of the other stuff that the egg white that the girl provides, the woman provides, to the process of making it possible for that embryo to develop in a normal, healthy way that can become a viable, you know, healthy human. All of that responsibility lies in the egg, not in the sperm. So the part of the sperm that matches the egg is that chromosomal part. And so your chromosomes are just as healthy as a man your age's chromosomes are. Sometimes they're bad, you know, or there's an error, and sometimes they're good. The part that we are on the hook for that they're not, that does get really compromised with age, that is this thing that we're working on and trying to maximize egg quality, is the everything else. And that's where MRT comes in. And it's pretty amazing. There are people walking around who have been conceived this way. But I was saying in a lot of countries, like in the UK, it's legal there. It's not legal yet in the US, but it's legal in the UK. If the woman has a known disease that she would pass on to her offspring through her mitochondrial DNA, then it is seen as a way of allowing her to have a child that wouldn't have that disease because they are replacing that mitochondrial DNA with someone else's mitochondrial DNA. So I am certain that Murray has a screening process for this, and I can't tell you exactly what it is, Miranda, and the other people that are doing it also have screening processes. Yes. Yeah, but that is, God, I've talked forever today. I was on time and then I got extra questions. So It's nice to see you guys, and I will see you again in about a month. And I hope you all have a good weekend and that everybody's managing their stress levels in a stressful time. Yeah. And you know, if anyone has any questions, the coaches with me, especially like Emily with the testing and with the Mira, like just let me know. Okay. Love you guys. Talk to you soon. Bye.